In Chapter 7, A Knock at the Door, Charles Darnay is arrested again on the same day that he was released. We find out that the Defarges have denounced him, as we knew would happen. They had did it his name. And there's one other person. Chapter 8 is going to kind of take a little bit of a detour. And so let's start it. Chapter 8, A Hand at Cards. Happily unconscious of the new calamity at home, Miss Pross threaded her way along the narrow streets and crossed the river by the bridge of the Pont Neuf, reckoning in her mind the number of indispensable purchases she had yet to make. Mr. Cruncher, with the basket, walked at her side. They both looked to the right and to the left into most of the shops they passed, had a wary eye for all gregarious assemblages of people, and turned out of their road to avoid any very excited group of talkers. It was a raw evening, and the misty river, blurred to the eye with blazing lights and to the ear with harsh noises, showed where the barges were stationed in which the smiths work, making guns for the army of the Republic. Woe to the man who played tricks with that army, or got undeserved promotion in it. Better for him that his beard had never grown, for the national razor shaved him close. Having purchased a few small articles of grocery and a measure of oil for the lamp, Miss Pross bethought herself of the wine they wanted. After peeping into several wine shops, she stopped at the sign of the good Republican Brutus of Antiquity, not far from the National Palace, once and twice the Tuileries, where the aspect of things rather took her fancy. It had a quieter look than any other place of the same description they had passed, and though red with patriotic caps, was not so red as the rest. Sounding Mr. Cruncher and finding him of her opinion, Miss Pross resorted to the good Republican Brutus of Antiquity, attended by her cavalier. Slightly observant of the smoky lights, of the people, pipe in mouth, playing with limp cards and yellow dominoes, of the one bare-breasted, bare-armed, suit-begrimed workman reading a journal aloud, and of the others listening to him, of the weapons worn or laid aside to be resumed, of the 2 or 3 customers fallen forward asleep, who in the popular high-shouldered, shaggy black spencer looked, in that attitude, like slumbering bears or dogs. The 2 outlandish customers approached the counter and showed what they wanted. As their wine was measuring out, a man parted from another man in a corner and rose to depart. In going, he had to face Miss Pross. No sooner did he face her than Miss Pross uttered a scream and clapped her hands. In a moment the whole company were on their feet. That somebody was assassinated by somebody vindicating a difference of opinion was the likeliest occurrence. Everybody looked to see somebody fall, but only saw a man and a woman standing, staring at each other. The man with all the outward aspect of a Frenchman and a thorough Republican. The woman evidently English. What was said in this disappointing anticlimax by the disciples of the good Republican Brutus of Antiquity, except that it was something very voluble and loud, would have been as so much Hebrew or Chaldean to Miss Pross and her protector, though they had been all ears. But they had no ears for anything in their surprise, for it must be recorded that not only was Miss Pross lost in amazement and agitation, but Mr. Cruncher, though it seemed on his own separate and individual account, was in a state of great wonder. "What is the matter?" said the man who had caused Miss Pross to scream, speaking in a vexed, abrupt voice, though in a low tone, and in English. "Oh, Solomon, dear Solomon!" cried Miss Pross, clapping her hands again. "After not setting eyes upon you or hearing of you for so long a time, do I find you here?" So we find out here that the person that causes Miss Pross to scream in the middle of this crowded wine shop is her brother, Solomon. But Jerry Cruncher recognizes him as well. "Don't call me Solomon. Do you want to be the death of me?" asked the man in a furtive, frightened way. "Brother, brother!" cried Miss Pross, bursting into tears. "Have I ever been so hard with you that you'd ask me such a cruel question?" "Then hold your meddlesome tongue," said Solomon, "and come out if you want to speak. Pay for your wine and come out. Who is this man?" Miss Pross, shaking her loving and dejected head at her by no means affectionate brother, said through her tears, "Mr. Cruncher." "Let him come out too," said Solomon. "Does he think me a ghost?" Apparently Mr. Cruncher did, to judge from his looks. He said not a word, however, and Miss Pross, exploring the depths of her reticule through her tears, with great difficulty paid for her wine. As she did so, Solomon turned toward the followers of the good Republican Brutus of antiquity, and offered a few words of explanation in the French language, which caused them all to relapse into their former places and pursuits. "Now," said Solomon, stopping at the dark street corner, "what do you want?" "How dreadfully unkind in a brother nothing has ever turned my love away from," cried Miss Pross, "to give me such a greeting and show me no affection." "There, confound it, there," said Solomon, making a dab at Miss Pross's lips with his own. "Now, are you content?" Miss Pross only shook her head and wept in silence. "If you expect me to be surprised," said her brother Solomon, "I'm not surprised. I knew you were here. I know of most people who are here. If you really don't want to endanger my existence, which I half believe you do, go your ways as soon as possible and let me go mine. I am busy. I am an official." So we find out here that Solomon, Miss Pross's brother, is an official in the French government realm somewhere. We don't know exactly what, but we know that he is working for the revolutionaries. "My English brother Solomon," mourned Miss Pross, casting up her tear-fraught eyes, "that had the makings in him of one of the best and greatest of men in his native country, an official among foreigners, and such foreigners! I would almost sooner have seen the dear boy lying in his—" "I said so," cried her brother, interrupting. "I knew it. You want to be the death of me. I shall be rendered suspected by my own sister, just as I am getting on." "The gracious and merciful heavens forbid!" cried Miss Pross. "Far rather would I never see you again, dear Solomon, though I have ever loved you truly and ever shall. Say but one affectionate word to me, and tell me there is nothing angry or estranged between us, and I will detain you no longer." Good Miss Pross, as if the estrangement between them had come of any culpability of hers. As if Mr. Lorry had not known it for a fact, years ago in the quiet corner in Soho, that this precious brother had spent her money and left her. He was saying the affectionate word, however, with a far more grudging condescension and patronage than he could have shown if their relative merits and positions had been reversed, which is invariably the case all the world over, when Mr. Cruncher, touching him on the shoulder, hoarsely and unexpectedly interposed with the following singular question: "I say, might I ask the favor as to whether your name is John Solomon or Solomon John?" The official turned towards him with a sudden distrust. He had not previously uttered a word. "Come," said Mr. Cruncher, "speak out, you know," which, by the way, was more than he could do himself. "John Solomon or Solomon John? She calls you Solomon, and she must know, being your sister, and I know you're John, you know. Which of the two goes first? And regarding that name of Pross likewise, that weren't your name over the water." "What do you mean?" "Well, I don't know all I mean, for I can't call to mind what your name was over the water." When he says over the water, he means back in Britain. So he's seen him over in Britain, and he knew him by the name John, but can't remember the last name. "No, no, but I'll swear it was a name of 2 syllables. "Indeed?" "Yes, t'other one was 1 syllable. I know you. You was a spy, witness at the Bailey. What in the name of the fathers of lies, own father to yourself, was you called at the time?" "Barsad," said another voice, striking in. "That's the name for £1,000," cried Jerry. So here we find out that all along Miss Pross has been talking about her wonderful saint-like brother Solomon, and we find out here that her brother Solomon was a spy, was one of the people who was accusing Charles Darnay back in England of treason by the name of John Barsad. The speaker who stuck in was Sidney Carton. He had his hands behind him under the skirts of his riding coat, and he stood at Mr. Cruncher's elbow as negligently as he might have stood at the Old Bailey itself. So here we find out that Sidney Carton has come to France.